Well, hello there. Welcome to the recap of day 2 of the Unity game development through the Digital Nest. So, in the last video, I had just wrapped up setting up two of the components of the tank game object. But one thing that happened tonight in the workshop, and I realized I did this to myself, um, is the way that I set the project up. I thought everyone was going to be using the same version of Unity, but one student has a different version. I'm sure that it is a different version that uh, I did it to myself. So if you need to get the catch-up file, if you miss class, I'll need to give you a catch-up file, and it's going to be a Unity package and it's going to you're basically be restarting the project. If you miss a session, I'll give you the package and I'll have you like open it up in a new project. I'll be able to show you how you can, if you did something special in your previous stage, because at a certain point here, I am going to give you guys a model of a tank that not this tank, but a model of a tank that I brought into the 3D modeling software I use. And right now the tanks are cute. This one's green. There can be a red one and a blue one, but it's always a solid color on the main skins of the tank. But it turns out that with a little bit of work, I was able to totally break the tank apart and have the ability to just basically color everything on it and make some really interesting looking tanks. So if you do need to get a catch up file in order to get caught up, it's basically going to be like restarting the project. But I've learned now how to. I can take my project and turn it into a Unity package, and that way you'll get the whole project right at the stage that it's at right now. And if you need to do that, it would involve going to our game development class, and for each class period on the classwork tab, for each class meeting that we have, I will create a classwork assignment. And here's the catch up file for tonight. And one student used it. I had him download it. You would click on the download, you click on the catch up file, and like this is a good chance for me to do an experiment here. I'm going to click on these little three dots right here and tell it to open in a new window, because Google Drive does not know what to do with a Unity package file. And when I get to this window, it still doesn't know what to do with it. It's still telling me it's like there's no items. No, there's like hundreds of items. Click the download button. That's going to cause this little window come up that says, "Hey, this package is 39 megabytes. It's too big to scan for viruses. Do you really trust this guy? Trust me, I'm not going to hurt you." Click the download button, and in a moment, the download should begin. And here it comes. It's 39 megabytes. Actually, not that bad, all things considered. Now, you don't even need to get it out of the downloads folder. From the downloads folder, you can go to Unity, to your project, and let me see. I'm going to go assets, import package, custom package, and I want to go ahead and select that catch-up file that I had. And here all this comes. Now, it's looking at some stuff here, and it's seeing that in this project already has a bunch of stuff, but there's some stuff it doesn't have, and it's checking all that stuff it doesn't have that's in the import file. Interesting. All right, so I'm going to click import, and all that stuff comes in, and my project should be good. I should be ready to go. So we should actually be able to do this to our own project, and all it will do is it will just bring in any of the assets or stuff that we did, any of the changes we made, and we'll see. Hopefully it'll work. So that would have caught a person up. Then we're going to start to add components. So, because there's two more components we need to add to the tank before we can get to talking about the first script we're going to write. So, our tank right now, we got a rigid body on it. This is what's going to allow us to apply physics to the tank to make it move. We froze our position in Y and X and Z rotations. We added a box collider, which we adjusted the size of the box collider so that it would contain the tank. And you can see that box collider, it's that green bounding box. And now we're going to click here, Add Component. We're going to type the letters AU, and we're going to select an audio source. And this audio source, has a lot of fields, a lot of settings that can be set in it. We're going to set the audio clip for this to be the engine idle audio clip. And we're going to check loop. We're going to leave play on awake also checked. Leave those checked. And we're going to set the volume to 0.25 because it's really loud. And so I got the volume set to 0.25. And that audio source is set up. Now, believe it or not, we're going to add another audio source. This one's going to be the audio source that's going to handle changing from the idle clip to when the engine's driving or when the engine is changing back to the idle clip. A script is going to handle this audio source. All we need to do to this one is uncheck play on awake and set its volume also to 0.25. So that way our audio for our tank is at 1.25. All right, so now with that closed, we're going to go ahead and click on our scripts folder. I'm pretty sure in the last video I did this, but if it's worth it to say it again. We need to make sure that Unity knows that we're using Visual Studio to do our scripting. So I'm going to click on Edit Preferences, and I'm going to make sure the external tools show that Visual Studio Community 2019, or yours might say Microsoft Visual Studio. Whether it says Visual Studio Community 2019 or Microsoft Visual Studio, those are the two things that we want to see there. Visual Studio or Microsoft Visual Studio. It depends on what got installed on your system. But Visual Studio is what we're using. Make sure that that's set there. Make sure it does not say open by file extension. That's what we don't want to have happen. We want Unity to know which editor is being used because Unity is going to send a library of functions to that editor that we're going to use in the project. Close that window out. And then here in the scripts folder, there's a folder called Tank. So the scripts folder called Tank, and the Tank folder's got a script called TankMovement. I'm going to click and drag that TankMovement script onto my tank game object. And now the script is attached to my tank game object. Make sure you did this to the tank game object. If you accidentally added that script to something else, remove the script, the three little dots, and remove component, and then make sure your tank is selected and that you put the script on the tank. Now, there's some things we're going to link up here. This audio source, this movement audio, it needs an audio source. So I'm going to click that first audio source and drag it and drop it onto the audio source. That makes this audio source have an association with this movement audio. When the tank comes to life, that audio source kicks in and does its job. And then I need to be clear. I need to tell the script here which audio clip is engine idling and which audio clip is engine driving. To do that, I will click on this little circle select button and select engine idle for the engine idling and engine driving for the engine driving here. So I got those set up. Now, the first time you open up a script here with Visual Studio, it's going to ask you to sign in. And I'm already signed in, so it's going to go straight to the script. When it asks you to sign in, you need to use your Microsoft account to sign in. There usually is also if you don't have a Microsoft account, you can set one up. I recommend using your Gmail to set up a Microsoft account. As soon as you register and sign into a Microsoft account, it will take you into this first script here. If the script doesn't show up, if for some reason, you get here and you're like, I've got no script, you probably see a window off to the side like this. And these might already be open as well. So if that happens, if you come to a dark screen like this and you're like, where's my script? Mr. Booth said I was supposed to have a script. Well, here under the assembly C#, you can click on assets. And in the assets, there's a scripts folder. In scripts, what do you know? There's tank, and in tank, there's what do you know? TankMovement. Click it, it opens it up. I don't know why it doesn't show up At school, about 5 out of 25 students, it won't show up for those 5 students. Go figure. All right. So the script starts off with these 7 public variables, which look suspiciously player number, speed, turn speed, movement audio, engine idling, engine driving, pitch range. Can you remember those 7 terms? Let's see. My tank. Player number, speed, turn speed, movement audio, engine idling, engine driving, pitch range. These are the public variables that are listed right here in this script. So this tank movement script, which is a public class, it's a class of functions. There's a whole bunch of functions down here. In fact, there's some functions here that are commented out. We're going to have to uncomment here in a moment. But these public variables, they're declared here in the script, and they show up in the Unity inspector. They are what we see right here. All these different variables are just these. That code's manifested over there in the Unity game engine. So as you think about it, player number. Well, we're going to have player 1 and player 2. There's going to be a speed we're going to be having the tank move at, which we set to 12. Want to speed the tank up? Change that number. Turn speed. Want to turn faster? Change that number. Audio source. That's that movement audio where we dragged and dropped that audio source. It's just loaded right here into this public variable. So the script can access it. Not only can the script access it, other scripts can access it. Public variables and public classes can be accessed by other public classes. Now, after these public variables here, you'll notice we have a bunch of privates. And let's turn this code on by deleting this block comment. Those 2 characters there, the /*, that's how you start a block comment. And that's on line 13. Take those 2 out, and then go down to line 49 and make sure you take out the close block comment down there on line 49. The /*. That needs to go away down there on line 49. Get rid of that. That turned on all this code right here. It turned on the private variables that we're going to talk about now, and it also turned on the awake method, the on enable method, on disable method, the start method, and let's talk about these private variables now. There's a movement axis name. There's a turn axis name. So our movement axis is Z. We move forward and backward in Z. Our turn axis is X. We turn to the right and we turn to the left in X. And then we head off in Z. Whatever Z is, whatever direction our tank ends up facing, its local Z is pointing to forward, and it's going to go off in that local Z direction. And so our vertical axis is going to be our movement. Our movement axis will be linked to, well, here's how it works. Back in Unity, under Edit, Project Settings, you can see something called the Input Manager. So in the Input Manager, you can see all the different axes that are set up. And for instance, horizontal 1 is set up to be looking at keys A and D. Horizontal 1 is looking at our X axis, and keys A and D are looking, that's what we're looking at there. Horizontal and vertical 1 here is S and W. S and W, these are for our moving forward and backward. So our vertical axis is going to be keyed to S and W. And the script needs to know which one of these it's talking about. Because player 1's got a horizontal 1 and a vertical 1. Player 2's got a horizontal 2 and a vertical 2. And then there are some additional axes, but they're not set up to any keys. This is like they've set us up if we wanted to have, more players. It's basically, they've set us up to set up for a 4-player game. You'd have to set some key binds there on these, but that's the long and short of the input manager. And let's see, this private variable is the rigid body that is on the player, our tank right here. Our tank has a rigid body, and This is what we're going to use. We're going to use the physics engine in Unity in order to make our tank move. And then we have movement input value. This is going to be finding out, are we pressing the W key or the S key? And our turn input value, are we pushing the A key or the D key? And then original pitch. As the game is playing and as the engine is running, the pitch of the engine is going to change. It's going to go up, it's going to go down. And uh, this original pitch is going to be what it's going to start at. And then in script, we're going to write code that will, if we are idling and we start to drive, the pitch will change. If we stop driving and we go back to idle, it'll go back to idle, but at a different pitch. And then if we leave idling to go to drive again, it'll go back to driving at a different pitch. It'll change. It'll be a range in the pitch too. So it'll make the sound sometimes higher and lower. That variety in sound just makes the game a little more aesthetically pleasing. Now, the first function we run into is the awake function. The awake function, it's the very first function to execute when this game object becomes active, when this script becomes active. And what's happening is it's getting the component, it's getting the rigid body. This get component command is Unity game engine for, get the rigid body off of the player object and store it into this variable here, m underbar rigid body. And again, it's getting this rigid body off of the tank. That rigid body has various fields that we can affect, and we'll be changing is kinematic, and we'll also be using some of the rigid body's functions which allow us to move its position, move its rotation. On enable, when we first enable the tank, we want to make is kinematic false so that the tank will be allowed to move. And we'll be initializing our movement input value and turn input values at 0 so that the tank's not going anywhere. It's not moving. It's input values. It's waiting for key presses, WASD. On disable, when the tank dies, when the tank gets blown up by the enemy, we turn the is kinematic into true, and then no tank movement is allowed. The WASD keys will be disabled. They'll seem to not work. In the start function, here we're loading in the various axes name. Notice up here this is player 1, isn't it? So already some executable code happening down here. So here, this movement axis name is a string, and we can see that right up here. Movement axis and turn axis, both of these are strings. Strings are like text. And so text is represented by characters contained inside of double quotes. And so this is creating a string that's going to have the word vertical plus the player number. So this is going to be vertical 1, and the turn axis name is going to be horizontal 1, just like that input manager I showed you. And then the original pitch is set here to the M movement audio pitch, whatever it was initially. Now, from there, this is as far as I got tonight. Time flies. And so Thursday, we're going to be starting right here in the update method. And by the end of the workshop on Thursday, we should have our tanks driving around in the scene. And we might even have the audio working. We'll see. Hopefully, we'll see how things go. Hopefully, it's smooth. Thanks. If you have any questions, get a hold of me. I'm happy to answer them. You can email me, robert@digitalnest.org, or you can message me through Google Classroom. Thanks, and I'll see you on Thursday.